All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have our hopefully incredible Year in Giving Happened Now What webinar with our Director of Stewardship at Best Friends Animal Society, Kelly Morton. This is the first of our year-long animal shelter fundraising webinar series. So thank you for joining us this morning for this first episode. You will notice probably that you are all on mute. We're doing that just to try to minimize noise, but we still want to hear your questions. So you'll notice on the side panel, there is a questions box. And at any time during the webinar, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into that box and it'll all be recorded. Then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through and Kelly will address those questions as they come up. If we do have a time issue, we will be sure to follow up on everybody's questions, so please do put them in there. But for the sake of time, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly, and thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share this hopefully really helpful information with everyone. And I certainly welcome your questions, as Rhea said, and any follow-up. I am happy to chat with you and welcome your ideas after the webinar. So let's jump right in. But before we do, let's jump for joy. We all survived year-end fundraising. Congratulations. Give yourself a pat on the back. It's a lot of work and hopefully very rewarding. So the question is, what's next? Well, now the work really begins because nonprofit development is a marathon, not a sprint. Because once you've secured the gift, it's time to get busy and steward your donors to the next gift. So here's a really simple view of the donor life cycle. You identify potential donors, you introduce them to your organization, build a relationship and a connection with them, and then you ask for the gift. You've invested a lot into that person, and by the way, I say person because 70% of charitable giving comes from individuals, in case you didn't know that. But anyway, if you're blessed enough to get the gift, continued investment will surely pay off, no matter who it comes from. And that continued investment is stewardship. And here's why it's so important. The cost of retaining existing donors is about 20% the cost of acquiring new ones. And according to the 2018 Fundraising Effectiveness Project survey, which surveyed more than 13,000 nonprofits regarding 2016 to 2017 fundraising, every $100 gained in 2016 was offset by $96 in losses through gift attrition. And basically, that's what that means. It's a loss. So alternatively, every 100 donors gained, 99 were lost through attrition. So how do you make sure your organization is keeping their fair share of donors and donor dollars and turning new donors into loyal donors? You steward them well. And the result of a good stewardship program is donors giving regularly, giving to priorities, giving in usable ways, giving to their capacity, really feeling recognized, being willing to participate, spreading the message, and bringing others along. So in other words, really being your brand advocate. Everything we want donors to do on our behalf, right? So good stewardship means really less work for us in the end. But what does a good stewardship program entail? Let's take a look. At the highest level, stewardship includes thanking donors, recognizing them, and reporting impact. And like the donor life cycle, this stewardship is a continuous loop. So hopefully you're getting repeat gifts. And there are certainly other stewardship activities like events and tours, other communication touch points, but these three, thank, recognize, and report, rise to the top. So let's take a look at each of them. First, thanking donors. Multiple sources agree that thanking donors is key. So you'll see here why people did not make another donation. They weren't acknowledged or thanked for their previous gift. They felt unappreciated. So we just want to make sure that if we want second or ongoing gifts from a donor, we make them feel acknowledged and appreciated. That's a lot of data. So there's just two numbers that this boils down to. 65% of first-time donors don't make a second gift. That's a lot. But 80% of donors say a prompt, meaningful thank you letter and additional communication that explains how their donation was used and what would convince them to make another gift. So if you just make sure that they are appreciated and give them ideas on how their gift is making an impact, you can change those numbers around. Here we have a great quote. The donor is the customer. They're buying the experience of feeling good. Make them feel that and you get rewarded. And there are multiple ways to thank donors. So let's take a look at a few.
Hey, Kelly.
First, yeah.
Hi, I just noticed we've had a couple people say that their audio was not connected. So if it's okay, I just would like to do a really quick check with the audience. If you guys can hear us, will you please raise your hand? There's a little icon there, or just shoot us a really quick chat, just letting us know that you can hear us. All right, looks like people are raising their hands. All right. I think I raised my hand. Perfect. Yes, you did, Rebecca. Thank you. All right. All right. Sounds like we've kind of moved through some of the issues there. Perfect. Continue on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So just to continue, we're looking at a few different ways to thank donors. So first is the handwritten thank you note and a telephone call, both very personal approaches. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, who has the time to do that? I hear you. But a great idea is to use your volunteers to write thank you notes and make phone calls. Arm them with a few details about the donor, their gift, and a call script, and then set them free. And for your priority segments, you may want to ask your executive director or board members or other key staff to at least sign the thank you notes and make phone calls. So with those especially important donors, you may want to take that extra step just to make sure that they feel especially appreciated. An acknowledgement letter that can be used for multiple donors can be warmed up by telling the story of an individual animal. If you go this route, where you're using one letter for multiple people, just be sure to personalize the letter in the greeting and make sure the story is pertinent to each of the recipients. And once again, be strategic on who signs the letter. It could be your executive director, the person with the best relationship with the donor, or the person likely to feel the greatest impact from the donor's generosity. So it could be somebody, for example, in programming. A couple of other hints: electronic gifts should be recognized with electronic communications, and you should shoot for sending thank yous no more than 48 hours after receipt. And if you can do it within 24 hours, that's even better. In a poll, more people said a fast appreciation or acknowledgement, thank you, is more important than a personalized one, although both are really important. So I recommend you do both. So here we have a video. Let's see if this is going to work. Oh, darn. Oh, darn. Doesn't look like the video is going to work. When we send out the deck, we'll make sure that you guys get that. So my apologies. And then a great idea, this is just such a fabulous, creative, and an inexpensive thank you from the Humane Society of Northeast Georgia. They thank donors on their first-year anniversary of their gift. And not only is this a great thank you, but it's a great excuse to surprise and delight your donor. Any excuse to be in touch with your donor is a really good one. And so this is just such a creative way to do that. And I'm going to go back to video for a second, even though that didn't play. Videos will make sure your thank yous are never dry. The video that I attached in here, Maddie Fun recently featured. It's an adorable video from Heaven on Earth, a cat sanctuary and adoption center in Los Angeles. And then a new thing out there are video postcards. Thank View, and that's with a V, is just one vendor out there that does it. It allows anyone at your organization to record a video thank you and allows organizational branding. If you visit thankview.com, they'll send you an example and give you the chance to set up a demo. So that's something to look at as well. And then I wanted to take a quick note to talk about disaster relief. Certainly don't forget to steward those who help during disasters. Some of those who do are certainly going to be your current donors, so you should be stewarding them anyway, but certainly recognize them for this kind of above and beyond gift. And then new donors who give during disasters may not be likely to give again. We often hear that. But if properly stewarded, they may just jump on board for regular giving. And if you don't steward them, you can rest assured they probably won't give again. So better to steward them, see if you can bring them into the fold. And this is just an example of some pages from an impact report we did after Hurricane Harvey. And so just an example where we show a story of a dog that was rescued and some statistics that were shared. So both really appealing to the head and the heart donor, so to speak. So now we're going to transition into donor reporting. So a thank you isn't all you should say when your campaign comes to an end. It's important to share how the donor's gift is helping to make an impact. And this is a great quote from a major donor. If the organizations I support were not just saying they need money, but they tell me why and what impact that money will have, I'd give even more. So that's just a great thought to keep in mind and a great reason to make sure that you're reporting on impact. So this is an example from Brandywine Valley SPCA. You know, the letter starts out with thanks for your support, and you can see the impact they had in 2018. Placements, live release rate, pet exams, and it goes into more details. And then if you talk to your donor about your campaign, your year-end campaign, or really any other campaign, it's always a great idea to share the results with them. So if, for example, you do tell them you launched a year-end campaign, you could report on total dollar amount raised, dollars translated into impact or resources, number of new donors gained, number of fundraisers who raised over a certain goal amount, and growth over your previous year campaign, as just a few ideas. And as I mentioned, it's always a great idea to share an animal story to reach your heart donors. This is a fabulous example from the Literacy Volunteers of Bangor. They take a unique approach to their annual report. They send a postcard with infographics on one side, and on the other includes a thank you message, as well as a summary of what they do, how they get it done, and what's new. So just a really graphic approach with impact and also that important thank you. And then we have donor recognition. So in addition to thanking donors and reporting impact, stewardship includes donor recognition. So the greater your donors giving, the greater the recognition benefits. So documenting donor recognition by segment is a good idea for both internal audiences and having an established plan you can communicate as benefits to donors might inspire larger gifts. So here, if you look at the left-hand column, you see the recognition benefit down on the left, and then you see different segments across the top. And you can see that each segment would get a membership certificate, and then only certain segments would get the remaining benefits. And so it really is just based on how you determine who your segments are, what they would be appropriate to receive as recognition. And these are just examples. There are certainly many, many others. And then here are a few examples of our donor recognition at Best Friends. So in our National Campaign Impact Report, we have a donor listing, and we break that out by different giving levels. And we also have a special thank you for our foundation partners. During the year that that Hurricane Harvey hit, we identified those who gave to the hurricane with a little asterisk just to call special attention to them. And in the report, we also did a special section to thank our volunteers who were so important to the success of the work during the hurricane. We also recognize donors at events. At the top right, you'll see one of our important donors getting an award for the work that they have done for us. And then underneath that is a donor wall where we recognize gifts at a certain level at our various regional centers. And again, these are just some examples. There are many, many more. So just to summarize, it's really all about donor love. So according to fundraising guru Jen Love, donor love is putting the donors at the heart of everything you do, at the heart of every interaction you have with them, expressing what your donors make possible by giving to you, and making them heroes for the amazing things that they help achieve. So the first principle, your donors are heroes. Every day, every direct mail piece, email, give them the opportunity to fix the world. They really want to help and they want to make an impact. It's a simple, critical shift from talking about what we do as the organization to what the donor, makes possible. Principle 2, share amazing and inspiring stories. So every time your donor hears from you, you want them to be re-engaged, re-energized, and fall in love with you all over again. And your story should provoke an emotional response in your donor. Number 3, you connect to your donor's values and emotions. Think about your organization and the 24 hours before it existed. It was founded likely out of the desire of a few restless and innovative people creating change to fix something. And your donors hold those same values. And it's that we can give them a sense of belonging. Principle 4, falling and staying in love. Good donor care is a courtship. It takes time. So think about the donor love story from the point of view of the donor. Are you surprising them? Are you asking them for help? Are you getting to know them better? Number 5, ask for one thing. Donors want to help fix something and feel really good about it. So what's the problem and how can your donor be the solution? Make it easy and make it feel good. Number 6, who or what is the right voice for your story? You have the privilege and responsibility to speak on behalf of a community of like-minded citizens and echo what they feel passionate about and give them a chance to take action for what they believe. So think about what exactly you're asking for and who is the right voice for that question. And number 7, say thanks with passion. And from Tom Ahern, pour love juice all over it. Use emotion, creativity. It's not the job of your executive director or the director of development, but everyone should have a hand in gratitude. And just make sure it's done with real passion. And so I think that ends the slides. So let's move on to questions.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. That was absolutely amazing. And we do have a couple of questions pending. The first one came in from Carrie Ann, and she said, the $1 million question, how do we steward our Facebook donors? We have virtually no contact information for them, usually just a name. So any recommendations you have on thanking our donors coming in from Facebook?
Yeah, we struggle with the same thing as do all nonprofits who use Facebook. The only thing I can really think of off the top of my head is put kind of just general thanks out on Facebook so that you're hitting them where they are. Because we can't identify who they are, at least, a general thank you on Facebook will hopefully reach them. They'll know who they are and hopefully recognize that is meant to be for them. It's a big struggle. I have read, and the name of the organization escapes me, but I can follow up, that there are companies out there trying to figure this dilemma out. And then there are also nonprofits trying to work together to get Facebook pressured into sharing the information because they have it. So there is work being done, but until that time, that's what I can come up with. Certainly, if anybody else has any ideas, we'd love to see you chat those to us. But that would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And Carrie Ann did follow up to say, they are doing posts on Facebook too. So glad to know that they are doing what they can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the next question actually is also from Carrie Ann. And she said, for the organizations that are home-based fosters or a TNR organization with no building or spay and neuter clinic an hour away, how should they go about stewarding as a group and not necessarily one-on-one? She says, a lot of shelters will hold events at their facility or have tours, but any ideas for those who don't have a physical location?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think in that case, just constant communication is going to be key, and then sharing your stories of the animals you are helping. So if you do have social media, I would definitely use that, and just make sure that you're constantly sharing your impact, sharing those heartwarming stories. The other thing is, you could always schedule activities, even though you don't have a physical location, maybe hold a fundraiser at a local restaurant. One thing, as an example, I was just at an event where a restaurant opened their outside patio and invited people to come and meet folks from the organization, have information to hand out, have things to sell, merchandise, a couple of animals there. So even though you don't have a physical location, use other physical locations where you can bring people to you. And then if there are, local kind of fairs or like farmers markets, things like that, bring your animals and your volunteers there, and just have information again to share. So rather than asking people to come to you, you go to where they are and have information available.
Awesome, and I agree with Carrie Ann, that is a great idea. So thank you for answering that. The next couple of questions come from Sarah, and she says, how do we recognize top-level donors without implicitly saying that others aren't as important? Is an event the best way to do that?
Yeah, it's a really big dilemma. But I do think you want to reward those donors that are giving at the highest levels. I don't know that it necessarily has to be something so explicit where people feel left out, but you can, and I think it's so typical that naming rights on rooms or buildings, for example, are reserved for those highest level gifts. And I think we see that in multiple locations like museums, for example, other public libraries and other buildings. So I think people are used to that, knowing that those opportunities are really reserved for others. And then like the impact report example I shared, we break out the giving levels. So we're still recognizing people at various levels. So you don't necessarily have to exclude people, but you may just choose to give them a little bit more. The other thing is you may do things behind the scenes. So for example, we have the benefit of having our founders in the sanctuary, but if a very important donor comes to the sanctuary, for example, we might schedule lunch with a founder. And nobody else needs to know that. That's kind of reserved for VIPs, but nobody else would feel excluded from that because they don't necessarily need to know. So if there's things like, if that's a big concern for you, that's what I would do, is kind of do those behind the scenes things.
Thank you. And Sarah's second question was, do people really want a phone call? They get mixed responses from people about this. Some people feel it's an invasion, especially around the holidays. So what's your take on phone calls to donors?
Yeah, well, I would definitely respect their time. So don't call, for example, during dinner or, you know, after, let's say, 7 o'clock. And I'm just throwing that out there as an example. We do find that it does make a positive difference in terms of giving, especially when one of our founders calls. And if you're not making an ask with the thank you, which I don't recommend, just saying thanks, then people are usually less offended by that. And so many times we'll get an answering machine, and so it's certainly not offensive to get a message of thanks. So I think it's worth it. And again, you may, just because of volume, you may need to segment that to you know, strategic donors. But I do think it's worth it, and I do think it makes a difference in terms of giving.
And this next one actually is coming from Kara, and it's going back to the Facebook stewardship, but it's more of a comment. And she said, an idea for a Facebook stewardship for those supporters who start a fundraising page. Her organization, they like to like the fundraiser as well as comment on their donation updates directly on their fundraising pages. So it's kind of a nice way, I guess, to have that direct visibility and follow up with people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Love that.
And then Rebecca, she had a question about a statistic that you shared. So she was wondering about the 65% of first-time donors do not give again. She's wondering, is that across all donation levels? And if not, how does that change across donation levels?
You know what? Let me follow up on that one. Yeah, I better follow up. I don't want to say something that could be erroneous. And that it is specific to first-time donors, but let me look that research up. It's from Penelope Burke, and get back to you if that's okay.
All right, and we can include that in the follow-up email, which we'll be sending out tomorrow. Or if not, if we don't have the information yet, we'll be sure to send a follow-up to all attendees. And Rebecca says that that is true. So Carrie Ann, she's asked, any tips on stewarding monthly donors? They're fortunate to be able to send handwritten notes to each donors, except for the monthly donors. Every donor gets our donor-centric snail mail newsletter. Those are still amazing. Anything we should be doing additional for the monthly people?
One thing you may want to consider is a special certificate for them, because they are sustainers. They're certainly a very important group of folks. Another thing you could do is you could certainly do kind of a pre-printed thank you, like maybe back to that donorversary idea. You know, just celebrate when they signed up as a monthly donor, and do that on a yearly basis. I do think, because sustainers are so important to us, that it is worth coming up with ideas on how to do that. Maybe and this is controversial, you may find that your donors don't really appreciate this, but a little gift for them, because they are an important group, that may be something. We've had folks tell us that they really don't want tchotchkes and things like that. We usually reserve those for prospective donors, but your group may be different, so that might be something to think about.
All right. And Sarah Ferguson, she says, thanks for the previous responses, by the way, as does Carrie Ann. She just sent in a thank you. But Sarah asks, we had a capital campaign last year, and now that building is almost complete. They would like to recognize those donors. Any idea on what type of event people might like for that?
Yeah, I think you could just do a simple reception where you have people that donated to the building come, do a ribbon cutting, do tours, and maybe have your board members do the tours, or other important people in your organization. And then depending on how many donors you have, you could always send a photograph of the new building and like a nice photo. And maybe a story of the first animals that are coming in, something like that. And then certainly a donor wall. People appreciate that if that's something you can afford to do and really want to take on. Recognition, it can be kind of pricey, and also a bit of work. So just keep that in mind. It may not be something you want to do. The other thing is at the event, maybe have a banner that recognizes the donors, again, depending on how many there are.
So that was our last question that we had typed into the box. If anybody else has any additional questions, I mean, please do feel free to ask them. Or if Kelly, if you have any other, comments or, just kind of points that you would like to share with anybody, or we might just have some time back.
I guess just one other point I want to share is, things aren't always going to go perfectly. There may be a donor you forget, or a check gets lost in the mail, or things like that. Just make sure your timing on an apology is really very fast and very heartfelt. And things are going to happen, so just be prepared. Kind of think about that before it happens if you can, and what your action steps are going to be. Especially at year end, things might fall through the cracks. I know a lot of organizations were seeing a lot of delays in mail. Checks were taking a ridiculously long amount of time to get to organizations. So, just be prepared that things are going to happen. And if you need to apologize, do it, and do it quickly. Do it with heart, but it'll be okay. So that was the one other thought I had. And again, I certainly welcome people to reach out to me with questions, ideas. I'm at Kelly M, as in Mary, at bestfriends.org.
All right. And Carrie Ann, she says, thank you for doing this. We look forward to future webinars on fundraising. And just kind of on that note, our next webinar will be on February 19th, and it'll be related to marketing and fundraising. So keep an eye out for that one. We'll be sharing it in our newsletter as well as in our Facebook group for people to be able to register and sign up for that. And if there's no other questions, I guess we'll call this one a wrap. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all again in the future.
Thank you.